Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome in to this week's History is Lunch. We are glad to have everybody with us today. My name is Drew Gardner with the two Mississippi Museums, and we are glad to have you in our home, the Craig H. Neilsen Auditorium here in the Museum of Mississippi History and the Mississippi Civil Rights Museum. We're also streaming live on both Facebook and YouTube, where you can find any of our previous History is Lunch programs available at any time at your leisure. We hope that you will make sure to go see the Hurricane Katrina Mississippi Remembers special exhibition before it closes next Friday. If you have not made a trip upstairs to go see that exhibit, you have just a little over a week left before that exhibit starts to make its way down, and we start prepping for the next space, which brings us to what we have today. Our next exhibition will be heavily focused on our America 250 and the America 250 celebration here in Mississippi. And as we get started today, we're excited to welcome Nancy Carpenter. Nancy is the development director for the America 250 Mississippi. She also serves as the Mississippi Department of Archives and History Board of Trustees. With an extensive career spanning banking, tourism, community leadership, Nancy has earned numerous honors, including the Mississippi Business Journal's Top CEO and Businesswoman of the Year. Her dedication to preserving history shines through all of her work on the restoration, especially in the restoration of the Tennessee Williams House there in Columbus. From her involvement in the Mississippi Bicentennial Commission to her current role as the CEO of the Columbus Cultural Heritage Foundation, Nancy has had a lasting impact that is felt throughout the state of Mississippi, and we are thankful to have her here with us today. She's going to share a little bit about Mississippi and America 250, and then we're going to hear from Gary Anderson with the Mississippi Public Broadcasting before we get into the screening of today's kind of subject, Ken Burns' The American Revolution. So let's give a round of applause for Nancy Carpenter.
Thank you, Drew. It is so great to be here at the two museums, and Katie Blunt is with us. Katie, as you know, is the executive director of MDAH, and so they have the best employees in the state of Mississippi. And I'm not exaggerating. I have been involved with them for about 13 or 14 years, and I've met and know them all personally. So why don't y'all stand? If you work for MDAH, just stand and let us thank you and give you a round of applause. Thank you. Okay, I do thank you for including me on the program today, and I promised them I would be very short. But I did want to share with you some of the things that are going on. It is a great day to be an American and a great day to be a Mississippian. We're continuing to celebrate Mississippi's story in American history, and we will continue to celebrate. A lot of people don't understand. They said, well, Nancy, are y'all just going to end this at the beginning of 2026? And I went, are you kidding me? This goes through December of 2026. So we're excited about that. Our mission at America 250 is to celebrate the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, marking America's semi-quincentennial, which is a mouthful. So we've even had some little contests. So go home and see if you can have others at your home say semi-quincentennial quickly. It's not easy. We aim to inspire our fellow Americans to reflect on our past, strengthen our love of country, and renew our commitment to the ideals of democracy through programs that educate, engage, and unite us as a nation. And that's what I really want us to think about, is what really unites us. America 250 will foster shared experiences that spark imagination, showcase the rich tapestry of American stories, inspire service in our communities, honoring enduring strength, and celebrate the resilience of the United States of America. And let's talk for a second about the things that do unite us. And I use my charm necklace often when I'm speaking. My late husband, Carol Carpenter, played football at Ole Miss, so I do have a little Ole Miss M Club charm on the left. And then I say, well, and in the middle is my majorette from Mississippi State. And I said, if we can get along, there's no reason everybody in this room could not get along. So we do talk about the things that unite us. We have taken our state of Mississippi and we've divided it up into regions. And Oxford, Mississippi, where I will be next weekend, Ole Miss is playing the Citadel. And so we're making sure that, I thought we had made sure that there's a flyover. And because of everything that's going on in America, I was speaking Monday to Rotary Club, and they said, "Now you know that there's not be a flyover." And I went, "What?" I mean, that was what they were most excited about at the beginning of the game. So a gentleman came up and he said, "I fly for the Blue Angels, and we've got a group, and we're going to bring it to you." And so we do have a flyover, and so we're working on that, and then we will introduce different ranks of the armed services, and we will do that. And then there will be a gentleman who will be awarded who is a disabled American veteran, and he will receive a wheelchair. So there are so many wonderful things that will be going on. So we are doing this around the state of Mississippi. It just happens to start in Oxford with what's going on there. Then we certainly know what all is going on in Jackson, Mississippi with the National Folk Festival. So I hope that all of you are planning on attending that. That's going to be great. And Hattiesburg and Vicksburg and other areas. I did want to mention, too, there are cards that are on your seat and on the tables. It lists the website of both America 250 and America 250 Mississippi. So hopefully you will take this with you and visit. You can also donate, but we really want you to visit and even upload the events that you might have. The Humanities Council has a wonderful grant program that they are administering for us. It's about $800,000. So there is a grant that is a grant that is considered a program grant. There's a $5,000 grant, a $10,000 grant, and a $20,000 grant. So if you are a nonprofit, if you're educational, it lists on our website everybody who qualifies, and honestly, almost everybody does qualify. So I know that John is here and others from the Humanities Council today. So do take that card and look at it. We're working with the Mississippi Development Authority, the Mississippi Arts Commission, and of course the Department of Archives and History. And he mentioned, Drew mentioned earlier, some of the activities. We have already hosted a naturalization ceremony here at the two museums, actually in this room. We will be hosting 2 of those naturalization ceremonies next year. So if you've never been to one, the minute you hear about it, I beg you to spare some time and come and experience what that will mean to you. I think that it's one of the most meaningful things that we have done this year. MDAH also will host 250 field trips. We also, here at the two museums, will have 250 objects that will be part of Mississippi Made. Nan and others are working on this, and it is going to be unbelievable. It will be here at the two museums, and it will be, I probably shouldn't say this, but I think there are 1 or 2 cars that are going to be in this building. I know that Nissan and Toyota both are sponsoring, and I probably shouldn't say any more. I will let out all the secrets, but it will begin in March, but it is going to be unbelievable. So mark your calendar for that. The Museum District also has some things, the Heritage Center in Tupelo, the Vicksburg National Park, and I mentioned the National Folk Festival, and then of course the Grammy Museum. So I'm gonna end my comments, but I have had I have had 17 family members that have served in the military. That's a lot of people, but the one that really is very meaningful to me. My son Luke, both my sons went to the military academy at West Point, and so I was asked to share what America means to me. So I was taken to a tent. I was to be in a limousine and then an Airstream, and then we got there and it was 95 degrees, and they said, okay, well, we're just going to interview you outside under this tent. I said, it's 95 degrees. Now this was the summer in DC, and they said, just put your notes down. We're just going to talk to you for an hour and a half. But to me, America means freedom, freedom given not by man but by God. As a mother from Mississippi with a son who proudly served in the military, I know firsthand the cost and the blessing of that freedom. Our country was built on the belief that every person is born with rights no government can take away: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I have watched my son put on that uniform and stand for those principles. And it fills me with both pride and prayer. Being American means standing for what's right, leaning on faith, and never forgetting the sacrifices that keep us free. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. I'm now going to invite Gary Anderson from the Mississippi Public Broadcasting. He's going to come share a little bit about the work that Mississippi Public Broadcasting is doing and helping bring this special preview of the American Revolution by Ken Burns to us today. And so I'm going to turn it over to Gary, and he's going to share a little bit.
Good evening, everyone. I don't know if it's evening or afternoon. I guess both of them will work, right? My name is Gary Anderson from Mississippi Public Broadcasting. I am the social studies specialist there. I've been there for a little over a year and a half now. I saw my old boss here a few seconds ago, Dr. Marvin Jeter. There he is right there. I'll make sure I shout out to him because he put me in a position to do some very good work, at least I think some very good work. I also want to introduce two young ladies that are here with me today. In the back right here, we have Kimberly Killen. She is our numeracy specialist at MPB. And in the very back there with the camera in her hand, that is Kedra Hooks. She is our early childhood specialist. And once again, my name is Gary Anderson. I am the social studies specialist here at MPB. And what we're going to do is share with you the film by Ken Burns, Sarah Botstein, and David Schmidt. And believe me when I tell you this here, you can't just say Ken Burns. You can't say Ken Burns. They get very, very upset when you don't say, Sarah Botstein and David Schmidt too. They want to give everybody credit for it. Now, one of the things that I'll tell you about this has been kind of a labor of love for me. I am an old, history teacher, and primarily I taught U.S. history from 1877 to present. So it was easy. It was easy to fall in love with this because it's something I hadn't been exposed to for a long time. It's 12 hours, y'all. 12 hours. When I say 12 hours, it is 12 hours. Very good though, but it's a very, very, very good good film. We're going to start by welcoming you and thanking you for being here with us here today, and we'd like to thank Drew for inviting us over here. And we'd love to take some opportunity and kind of share with you this very brief story that we have here, and we want to encourage you on November 16th to see the premiere. If you enjoy events, go back, young lady, don't get in too big a hurry. If you enjoy events like these, please consider supporting Mississippi Public Broadcasting, and you can do so by using the QR code here or going to MPB Foundation, and you can, of course, go online and see that. The American Revolution presents the story of men and women of the revolutionary generation, their humanity in victory and defeat, and the crisis that they lived through, by weaving together accounts of American political leaders and their British counterparts with the perspectives of the so-called ordinary people who waged and witnessed war. You can learn more about this at pbsonceagain.org. The American Revolution is available to stream for free on all stations branded PBS platforms, including pbs.org and PBS video app. Visit pbs.org for the latest episodes. And we're going to start right now. Hope you enjoy.
The American Revolution caused an impact felt around the world. The fight would take ingenuity, determination, and hope for a new tomorrow to turn the tide of history and set the American story in motion. What would you like the power to do? Bank of America.
From a small spark kindled in America, A flame has arisen, not to be extinguished. Without consuming, it winds its progress from nation to nation and conquers by a silent operation. Man finds himself changed and discovers that the strength and powers of despotism consist wholly in the fear of resisting it, and that in order to be free, it is sufficient that he wills it. Thomas Paine.
We know our lands are now become more valuable. The white people think we do not know their value, but we are sensible that the land is everlasting. Kanasatego, spokesman for the Six Nations.
Long before 13 British colonies made themselves into the United States, the Six Nations of the Iroquois Confederacy, Seneca, Cayuga, Onondaga, Tuscarora, Oneida, and Mohawk, had created a union of their own that they called the Haudenosaunee, a democracy that had flourished for centuries.
We heartily recommend union. We are a powerful confederacy, and by your observing the same methods our wise forefathers have taken, you will acquire fresh strength and power. Therefore, whatever befalls you, never fall out one with another.
In the spring of 1754, the celebrated scientist and writer Benjamin Franklin proposed that the British colonies form a similar union. He printed a cartoon of a snake cut into pieces above the dire warning, "Join or die." A few weeks later at Albany, New York, Franklin and other delegates from 7 colonies agreed to his plan of union, and then went home to try and sell it. But when the plan was presented at the colonial capitals, each of the individual legislatures rejected it, because they did not want to give up their autonomy. The plan died, but the idea would survive. 20 years later, "Join or die" would be a rallying cry in the most consequential revolution in history.
We are in the very midst of a revolution, the most complete, unexpected, and remarkable of any in the history of nations. Objects of the most stupendous magnitude, and measures in which the lives and liberties of millions yet unborn are intimately interested, are now before us. John Adams.
The American Revolution was not just a clash between Englishmen over Indian land, taxes, and representation, but a bloody struggle that would engage more than 24 nations, European as well as Native American, that also somehow came to be about the noblest aspirations of humankind. It was fought in hundreds of places, from the forests of Quebec to the backcountry of Georgia and the Carolinas, from the rough seas off England, France, and in the Caribbean, to the towns and orchards of Indian country. The fighting would take place on roads and in villages and cities, by woods and fields, and along waterways with old American names, the Susquehanna, the Tennessee and the Ohio, the Oriskany, the Catawba and the Chesapeake, and along waters with newer names, the Charles, the Hudson and the Schuylkill, the Brandywine, the Cooper and the Ashley, and finally, the York. The war grew out of a multitude of grievances lodged against the British Parliament by British subjects living an ocean away in 13 otherwise disunited colonies. It was also a savage civil war that pitted brother against brother, neighbor against neighbor, American against American, killing tens of thousands of them.
However great the blessings to be derived from a revolution in government, the scenes of anarchy, cruelty, and blood which usually precede it, and the difficulty of uniting a majority in favor of any system, are sufficient to make every person who has been an eyewitness recoil at the prospect of overturning empires. Abigail Adams.
The American Revolution was the first war ever fought, proclaiming the unalienable rights of all people. It would change the course of human events.
It's our creation myth, our creation story. It tells us who we are, where we came from, what our forebears believed, and what they were willing to die for. That's the most profound question any people can ask themselves.
What the American Revolution gave the United States was an actual idea of a moment of origin, which many other countries in the world don't have. And it has invested these particular years and these particular people with a set of stakes that are so far beyond what any set of events and any set of people can plausibly carry, that it has made the way that Americans think about this period very unreal and detached.
One of the most remarkable aspects of the Revolutionary War is that you had such different places come together as one nation. I'm not sure there is a state anywhere in the world in the late 18th century that has as wide variety of people who inhabit it. And so it really is actually kind of remarkable the way that that nation ends up cohering, not around culture, not around religion, not around ancient history. It was coming together around a set of purposes and ideals for one common cause.
Events like these have seldom, if ever before, taken place on the stage of human action. For who has before seen a disciplined army formed from such raw materials? Who that was not a witness could imagine that men who came from the different parts of the continent, strongly disposed to despise and quarrel with each other, would become but one patriotic band of brothers? George Washington.
At the bottom of Breed's Hill, General Howe was determined to come at the Americans one more time. Up above, Colonel Prescott knew his men had little powder left, and that many of their muskets were fouled from so much firing. This time, in order to make each shot count, he insisted his men wait until their targets were within 30 yards. As fast as the front man was shot down, the next stepped forward into his place, one militiaman recalled. It was surprising how they would step over their dead, as though they had been logs of wood. We fired till our ammunition began to fail, another militiaman remembered. Then our firing began to slacken, and at last it went out, like an old candle. British Marines with bayonets began climbing over the parapets. Some Americans hurled rocks or swung their muskets like clubs. Others clawed their way out of the redoubt and ran. It was all over in a matter of minutes. The Patriots had been driven from Breed's Hill. 115 Americans had been killed, and another 305 wounded.
The British succeed in that they drive the Americans off of the Charlestown Peninsula. They take Breed's Hill, they take Bunker Hill, but it has been a Pyrrhic victory of the First Order. It's 4 of the most awful hours of combat in American military history. There are 1,000 British casualties that day. There are 220-some British dead.
40% of the attacking force was killed or injured. 40%. That's horrendously high casualty rate. It is the highest casualty rate for the British Army until the first day of the Somme in 1916. It is unbelievably bloody, and that has a really profound impact.
The loss we have sustained, General Gage admitted, is greater than we can bear. During the final struggle, 2 prominent men had been killed. As Major John Pitcairn encouraged his British Marines to climb over the walls, he'd been shot through the chest and fell dying into the arms of his son. He was so hated by New Englanders because he had led the British troops at Lexington Green that at least 4 different men would subsequently claim to have fired the fatal shot. Dr. Joseph Warren, the president of the Massachusetts Provincial Congress, whom the British considered the most incendiary of all the rebel leaders, had insisted on joining the men defending Breed's Hill and was shot in the head. The British officer in charge of the burial detail boasted that they had stuffed the scoundrel with another rebel into one hole, and there he and his seditious principles may remain.
Saturday gave us a dreadful specimen of the horrors of civil war. You may easily judge what distress we were in to see and hear Englishmen destroying one another. God grant the blood already spilt may suffice. But this we cannot reasonably expect. Reverend Andrew Elliott.
When the news of the battle, remembered as the Battle of Bunker Hill, eventually made its way to London, the king proclaimed the deluded people of America were in a state of open and avowed rebellion. Anyone who now aided their cause was a traitor. General Gage had been right. The rebellion would never be crushed without overwhelming force. But Gage was soon called home, replaced as commander-in-chief by General William Howe. For almost 3 years, Howe would lead the struggle to try to put down the rebellion and carefully avoid ordering any more frontal assaults against entrenched Americans.
Britain, at the expense of 3 millions, has killed 150 Americans this campaign, which is 20,000 pounds a head. And at Bunker's Hill, she gained a mile of ground. During the same time, 60,000 children have been born in America. From these data, calculate the time and expense necessary to kill us all and conquer our whole territory. Benjamin Franklin.
We have been sent into life at a time when the greatest lawgivers of antiquity would have wished to have lived. When, before the present epocha, had 3 millions of people full power and a fair opportunity to form and establish the wisest and happiest government that human wisdom can contrive. John Adams.
As Washington and Howe faced off against one another in New York, in Philadelphia, the Continental Congress had been laboring to adopt Articles of Confederation, meant to formally bind all 13 states together, while also guaranteeing the independence of each, a first tentative step toward a permanent government for the new United States.
When we think about our American Revolution, we of course think about independence from Britain, and that's a big deal. But we also need to think about this is the formation of Republican government, and it's also the formation of our Union of our states. And all three of those were enormous gambles. They were unprecedented. There had never been the foundation of a republic out of a revolution, and these 13 colonies had had bitter rivalries with one another. And so forming a union out of these states was going to be as difficult as achieving independence from Britain.
Congress debated draft articles for weeks on the first floor of the Pennsylvania State House, where they had just declared independence in July. They were held up over a host of issues, including apportionment, boundary disputes, taxation, and autonomy of the individual states.
Congress was a disputatious assembly and not necessarily an efficient assembly through these years. Yes, they are running a war. Yes, they are founding a nation. But there's also a tremendous amount of infighting. There's a tremendous amount of inertia. There are more committees than anyone could count. And there were secret committees. For example, the first person sent to France to solicit aid from the French for the revolution is sent without the knowledge of the rest of Congress. As John Jay will later say to George Washington, there is as much intrigue in Congress as there is at the Vatican, and as little secrecy as there is in a boarding school.
Meanwhile, upstairs in the same building, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania held a convention of its own to establish its government. Similar meetings were being held in other states. All of the new constitutions would guarantee freedom of the press, fair trials, and due process under law, and made sure power rested not with autocratic governors, but with legislators elected by propertied men. Pennsylvania took things a step further. They created the most egalitarian constitution in the new United States, with a Bill of Rights and a one-house legislature elected by tax-paying working men as well as property owners, all of which worried many of the delegates downstairs.
Pennsylvania had a radical constitution where almost any white free man could vote and stand for office, which had never happened before, pretty much anywhere. People were committed to using the revolution to make it a real social revolution, a real economic revolution, and get free working people, us men, white men, a say in government, which was a radical idea at the time. John Adams wasn't for that. Samuel Adams wasn't for that. Richard Henry Lee wasn't for that. When John Adams read that Constitution, his response was, quote, "Good God."
In the new Code of Laws, I desire you would remember the ladies and be more generous and favorable to them than your ancestors. Do not put such unlimited power into the hands of the husbands. Remember, all men would be tyrants if they could. If particular care and attention is not paid to the ladies, we are determined to foment a rebellion and will not hold ourselves bound by any laws in which we have no voice or representation. Abigail Adams.
There will be no end of it. New claims will arise. Women will demand a vote. Lads from 12 to 21 will think their rights not enough attended to. And every man who has not a farthing will demand an equal voice with any other in all acts of state. It tends to confound and destroy all distinctions and prostrate all ranks to one common level. John Adams.
It's a misconception to think of the founders as being pro-democracy. But I think it's also a misconception to think that their failure to be democratic is some sort of flaw or error or something they just kind of missed. They were very adamantly opposed to democracy. Democracy came to America with all of the problems that came with it, not as a direct purpose of the American Revolution, really, but as an unintended consequence.
By the time Pennsylvania had ratified its constitution, the debates over the Articles of Confederation downstairs in Congress had become so heated, the prospect of compromise seemed so remote, that the delegates agreed to table the subject. Frustrated and worried about his sick wife, Thomas Jefferson returned home to Virginia, the place he still called my country. At Brandywine, General Howe had repeated the tactics that had won the Battle of Long Island. Now, Washington hoped to repeat his successful surprise attack on Trenton by hitting Howe at Germantown in early October. Washington's plan was ambitious and complicated. Success would depend on dividing his 11,000-man force into 4 separate columns, to undertake miles-long marches at night on poorly marked roads, so as to arrive simultaneously on the town's northern and western edges at precisely 5 a.m. on October 4th. Then at dawn, they were to storm into town on 4 different roads. It would be the first time during the Revolution that Washington dared hurl his army against the main British force. John Sullivan's and Anthony Wayne's columns swiftly swept aside British pickets north of the town. Wayne's men found themselves face to face with the British light infantry, the same soldiers who had massacred so many of their comrades at Paoli just 2 weeks earlier.
Our people pushed on with their bayonets and took ample vengeance for that night's work. The rage and fury of the soldiers were not to be restrained.
The Americans continued to push the British back through the town, driving them from one fenced yard to the next.
Fortune smiled on our arms. The enemy were broke, dispersed, and flying in all quarters. We were in possession of their whole encampment.
In the face of the advancing Americans, British Lieutenant Colonel Thomas Musgrave ordered half his regiment, between 100 and 120 soldiers, to duck inside the largest house in Germantown, the home of Benjamin Chew, the Loyalist ex-Chief Justice of Pennsylvania. Its walls were 2 feet thick. Musgrave directed his men to block the door and ground floor windows with furniture. Downstairs, his men were to bayonet anyone who dared try to enter, while others fired into the passing rebels from the upstairs windows.
Washington is advised, bypass them, go around them, isolate them, keep the momentum going.
But Henry Knox insisted that the house had to be taken right away. It would be unmilitary, he said, to leave a castle in our rear. Washington agreed. Artillery blew in the front door and damaged statuary in the garden, but bounced harmlessly off the walls. Continentals from New Jersey repeatedly stormed the house and were cut down on the lawn and front steps. As the siege at the Chew House went on, the bulk of the American force streamed past, continuing to drive the British back. A Patriot victory seemed likely.
About this time came on perhaps the thickest fog known in the memory of man, which, together with the smoke, brought on almost midnight darkness. It was not possible to distinguish friend from foe at 5 yards distance.
When the men who had penetrated the farthest heard the furious gunfire still coming from the Chew House. They believed the enemy had somehow gotten behind them. Now, it was the Patriots who began to fall back. General Cornwallis himself led the counterattack. His troops freed Musgrave's men from the Chew House and drove the Americans back along the roads they'd followed into town. The British had won. Again.
I rode over the battlefields, and with surprise and admiration approached the house which the brave Colonel Musgrave had defended. During the battle, some 30 defenders were killed and wounded. I counted 75 dead Americans. The rooms of the house were riddled by cannonball and looked like a slaughterhouse because of the blood splattered around. There, the entire English army was saved. Johann Ewald.
For the Americans, what had been a sure victory, looked like they were going to drive the British back into Philadelphia, becomes a fairly significant defeat. Washington gets away again, but there are hundreds of casualties. The British capture quite a few Americans, and what had been a glorious morning turns into a very grim evening.
Reporting to Congress, Washington tried to put the best face he could on his humiliating defeat.
Upon the whole, it may be said the day was rather unfortunate than injurious. We sustained no material loss of men and brought off all our artillery, except one piece. The enemy are nothing the better by the event, and our troops, who are not in the least dispirited by it, have gained what all young troops gain by being in actions.
He is very good at, I think, the key tactic for an insurrectionary force, which is living to fight another day, and successfully plays a long game of just not being crushed.
Washington's not a great field commander, but he's resilient, and he understands the kind of war he's fighting. At some point, he reaches the insight, and it's a basic insight. He doesn't have to win. The British have to win. He only has not to lose.
Washington had this really interesting quality of being able to project authority and confidence and allowing that to spill out into others so that they acquired authority and confidence by being in his orbit. I think he had the effect of pulling out some of the best in the people who were around him.
To provide his army with the reliable logistical support it desperately needed, Washington insisted that Congress appoint as Quartermaster General the officer he trusted most, Nathaniel Greene. But Greene was a fighting general. He knew there was more combat ahead and wanted to be in on what he called the mischief.
Greene says nobody in history has ever heard of a quartermaster. He doesn't want the job, but he takes the job. Like Washington, he's got a brain built for executive action, and he's good at being the quartermaster.
Thanks to Nathaniel Greene's mastery of logistics and Washington's appeals to state governors, by the end of March 1778, herds of cattle and sheep were plodding toward Valley Forge from several directions, along with wagon trains filled with everything from barrels of nails to brand new uniforms and crates of bayonets and muskets. Now that his men were better fed, clothed, and equipped, and their ranks were swelling as fresh recruits, recalled regulars, and returning convalescents all converged on Valley Forge, Washington wanted every man in his newly reorganized army to undergo formal military training, to end what he called the confusion that had too often undercut its performance on the battlefield. The man he picked to oversee that task was a newcomer to America. Friedrich, Wilhelm, Ludolf, Gerhard, August, Heinrich, Ferdinand von Steuben.
Never before or since have I had such an impression of the ancient fabled god of war as when I looked on the Baron. The trappings of his horse, the enormous holsters of his pistols, all seemed to favor the idea. He seemed to me a perfect personification of Mars. Private Ashbel Green.
Steuben claimed to be a baron, a lieutenant general in the Prussian army, and a close aide to Frederick the Great. He really was a baron, though a penniless one, and he had served in Frederick's headquarters for a time. But his army career in Europe had been cut short by an accusation that he had taken familiarities with young boys. In America, he said, he wanted to put his talents in the arts of war in the service of a republic. Steuben was hot-tempered, and his English was initially limited to a single word, goddamn.
When some movement or maneuver was not performed to his mind, he began to swear in German, then in French, and then in both languages together. When he had exhausted his artillery of foreign oaths, he would call to his aides, "Come and swear for me in English. These fellows won't do what I bid them."
Baron von Steuben is really a comical figure when he arrives at camp. The men make fun of him, but he is a man who you need pulling the men together and giving them a sense of common purpose. After the men have drilled with him for a little while, they stop laughing.
But for all his bluster, Steuben grasped the character of the men he was to work with. The genius of this nation is not to be compared with the Prussians, Austrians, or French, he wrote to an old friend back home. You say to your soldier, do this, and he does it. But here I am obliged to say, this is the reason why you ought to do that. And then he does it. Steuben taught the men to march at a common step of 75 paces a minute, and a quick step of 120 paces, to move in columns rather than straggle in single file, to shift into battle line and back again when under fire, to load and fire musket volleys more quickly, and to become proficient with the bayonet, the weapon that had once terrified them when in British or Hessian hands. As skills improved, so did morale. By spring, the danger of mutiny had eased. So had the mutterings about Washington's leadership. He was, it was clear, indispensable to the cause of liberty. That year, a German-language almanac published in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, would call Washington des Landes Vater, the country's father.
He was the glue that held people together. These 13 colonies had to come together, and he was the person to do it. We would not have had a country without him.
I don't know, actually. I mean, I can't believe I'm saying this, because I'm not a huge fan of great man theories of history or explanations of history. But let's put it this way. It's easy to see the American effort for independence failing without Washington's leadership.
On the morning of June 24th, 1778, Americans otherwise disconnected by the vastness of their continent witnessed an otherworldly phenomenon at roughly the same time as the moon eclipsed the sun. Indians and Spanish colonists in Mexico and Texas saw it first. When it reached Spanish New Orleans and British Mobile, the flags of empire flew in sudden darkness for more than 4 minutes. The total eclipse lasted even longer for the Muskogee Creeks on the Chattahoochee River. and for the maroon communities of self-emancipated former slaves hidden in the Great Dismal Swamp. When mid-morning darkness descended on the Virginia Capitol at Williamsburg, lightning bugs were seen as at night. The same darkness briefly enveloped Washington's army as it followed the British into New Jersey. Had this happened upon such an occasion in olden time, Private Joseph Plum Martin remembered, it would have been considered ominous either of good or bad fortune. But we took no notice of it.
I think to believe in America, rooted in the American Revolution, is to believe in possibility. That, to me, is the extraordinary thing about the patriot side of the fight. I think everybody on every side, including people who were denied even the ownership of themselves, had the sense of possibility worth fighting for.
The American Revolution changed the world. It's not just about the birth of the United States. It has ramifications across the globe. So studying the American Revolution, understanding it, and putting it in a global context, I think is vitally important for us to understand why we are where we are now.
Our country was thrown into great confusion by the long continuance of the war. The churches in Virginia were almost entirely shut up, and its holy ordinances unobserved. Most of our men were engaged in the war. Our town had now become a garrison. Betsy Ambler.
Betsy Ambler of Yorktown, Virginia, had been 10 when the war began. She was now 15 and had lived most of the intervening years away from home. By the spring of 1780, she was back in Yorktown with her family. Life there had changed. The most populated parts of Virginia all lay within reach of the Royal Navy and any troops the British might land. Governor Thomas Jefferson and the Virginia Assembly chose to move the capital from nearby Williamsburg to Richmond. And since Betsy Ambler's father had been appointed to the state government, her family would have to leave Yorktown again. George Washington had long known that Yorktown was particularly vulnerable. As early as 1777, he had warned a Virginia militia commander against stationing troops there.
I can by no means think it would be prudent to have any considerable stationary force at Yorktown. Being upon a narrow neck of land, it would be in danger of being cut off. The enemy might very easily throw up a few ships and land a body of men there who would oblige them to surrender.
By the night of October 11th, the Allies had begun digging a second parallel. But before the noose could be tightened completely, two enemy redoubts, numbers 9 and 10, had to be taken. The American target was redoubt number 10. The men were from Lafayette's force. Alexander Hamilton was in command. Joseph Plum Martin and his company led the way.
We advanced beyond the trenches and lay down on the ground to await the signal. Our watchword was Rochambeau, a good watchword. For being pronounced Rochambeau, it sounded, when pronounced quick, like "Rush on, boys."
When the signal was given, Martin and his fellow soldiers rushed forward. Right behind them came Rhode Islanders including free black men or former slaves. The moment they reached the abattis, the redoubt's defenders began firing down into them.
But there was no stopping us. I forced a passage at a place where I saw our shot had cut away some of the abattis. While passing, a man at my side received a ball in his head and fell under my feet, crying out bitterly. The fort was taken, and all quiet in a short time.
Lafayette sent a dispatch to a French officer in the column assigned to capture Redoubt Number 9, saying his men were in his redoubt. Where are you? Tell the Marquis I am not in mine, the French officer replied, but will be in 5 minutes.
There was no mercy that night. Complaints and groans could be heard everywhere. Someone called out here, another there, begging to be killed for the love of God, as the redoubt was strewn with the dead and wounded. So much so that we had to walk on them. Georg Daniel Flor.
The Allies lost no time in rolling their big guns into both redoubts and opening fire on Yorktown.
It was absolutely horrific. There was no moment to rest. There was no place to hide. For days, there was continuous bombardment.
Cornwallis knew his cause was hopeless, but he could not seem to bear what Bannister Tarleton called the mortification of a surrender. At about 10 o'clock in the morning, on October 17th, 1781, a drummer appeared on a British parapet, beating his drum, the signal that Cornwallis wished to negotiate. When the thunder of the guns drowned out the drumming, an officer climbed up next to the soldier and waved a white handkerchief.
He might have beat away till doomsday if he had not been sighted by men on the front lines. But when the firing ceased, I thought I had never heard a drum equal to it. The most delightful music to us all. Ebenezer Denny.
The Battle of Yorktown was over. The Patriots and their French allies had won. The world would never be the same. Surrender negotiations went on for a day and a half. Cornwallis wanted his British and German soldiers free to sail home. Washington refused. He recalled the disrespectful way Patriot General Benjamin Lincoln and his men had been treated after the fall of Charleston. Until a formal peace was reached, the surrendering soldiers were to remain in the United States as prisoners of war. Cornwallis had little choice but to agree. As the British and Germans marched out of what was left of Yorktown, their flags cased, their numbers reduced by wounds and disease, they had orders to avoid even looking at the victorious Americans. Only the French, they'd been told, were worthy opponents. Washington and Rochambeau waited on horseback. Lord Cornwallis was nowhere to be seen. He claimed to be ill. But as a professional soldier, he may simply have been too humiliated at having to surrender his army to a group of rebels to make an appearance. Cornwallis's second-in-command, General Charles O'Hara, stood in for him and tried to surrender his sword to General Rochambeau. Rochambeau refused to accept it. "We are subordinate to the Americans," he said. "General Washington will give you orders." Washington wouldn't accept it either. He passed O'Hara onto his second-in-command, Benjamin Lincoln, who formally accepted the sword and then handed it back, as custom dictated.
So the ultimate humiliation, not only having to surrender to the Americans, but having to surrender to the second in command of the Americans.
With what soldiers in the world could one do what was done by these men? One can perceive what an enthusiasm which these poor fellows call liberty can do. Who would have thought 100 years ago that out of this multitude of rabble would arise a people who could defy kings? Johann Ewald.
Listen, like I was telling you guys earlier, it's 12 hours, and they break it up over 6 nights. It is an excellent watch. If you are a fan of Ken Burns, he's had some great things out, of course. Muhammad Ali is one of my favorite ones that he did, and we did one last year with Da Vinci, even one on Benjamin Franklin. So we encourage you to go out and to access this particular film on November 16th. If you're like me, you have teachers in your families, especially social studies teachers. Most of these resources come along with teaching resources that accompany it, and they are free resources right now. So you might want to, they can go ahead and access them as quick as they can and kind of have a look at them. We thank you for giving us the opportunity to come in and share this with you. And once again, we want to encourage you on November 16th to see the premiere. On the screen up here, we have a QR code. If you have your phones, if you'll open your camera up and let your camera, of course, rest on that, it'll give you a link to complete a survey. If you are like me and you are technically challenged, we also have some flyers in the back of it, and the young ladies will come around and give it to you. You can fill it out that way if you like. While they're doing that, if you have a couple of questions, I'll take a couple of questions. Keep in mind now, my specialty is 1877 to present, but I did stay at a Holiday Inn last night. So we'll see what we can do for you. Yes?
If they didn't surrender, if they didn't surrender until 1781, why are we celebrating 1776?
Well, we're celebrating the Declaration of Independence. I'll give you one better. The whole situation starts in 1775. So when we look at the actual, the actual conflict when it starts in 1775, in truth, if that was the first act of defiance where they were resisting, of course, the British leadership. So if in truth, you can make the argument that the semi-quincentennial is not in 2026, but in 2025. One of the things that I like about the American Revolution, and you really don't think about it a great deal, it is the second civil war that we actually fight in this country. A lot of people don't look at it that way, but the first civil war that we actually fought in this country was the American Revolution starting in 1775. That's pretty good for somebody that just stayed, yeah, okay. Well, if you have another question or so, I'll take another question or so, and we will, wrap this up, and we'll turn it back over to Drew if no one has anything else.
Well, let's give MPB a round of applause and Nancy Carpenter. We are so thankful to have great partnerships to bring you programs like this. Again, if you have not, I'll just say it one more time, please make your way, tell your friends, to your family to make their way to go see the Hurricane Katrina Mississippi Remembers exhibits while it is here for about 10 more days before it comes down. If you haven't complete this survey, we've also got those paper ones in the back. And then we hope you'll join us again next week, where we'll get to have Tammy Milkey and Michelle Martin, and we'll celebrate the legacy of Mildred D. Taylor and her literary work based right out here in Mississippi. So thank you guys so much. You'll have a great rest of the day.